Perfect. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of the Kingston Environmental Advisory Forum, long name. My name is Ian Sullivan. I am the committee clerk assigned to this committee. Just before we get into the kind of business of the evening, I just wanted to go over one thing. So all of the members that are joining us as technical reps, you are still considered normal members of the committee. So you have voting rights, you have speaking rights, you can move and second things. So you're just like every other committee member. So that will really help the committee moving forward for making sure everyone can move and second things. Secondly, before we get into our election of officers, which is the first item on our agenda, I think it would be useful for everyone to kind of get to know each other so we can know who we're going to be working with for the next little while. So like I said, I'll start off and then I'll pick on a person to get started and then kind of go through my screen as I can see it. So my name is Ian Sullivan. I'm the committee clerk. I am happy to be here. I will first go with David Arnott.
Thanks, Ian. I'm Provincial Officer David Arnott with the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, sitting as the technical advisor based out of the Kingston district.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Next, I see David Stocks.
Unmute. Hi, everybody. David Stocks. I am a retired high school math and science teacher, about 4 years now. Passionate about the environment. We've got a lovely house downtown Kingston, but we've also got 100 acres in South Frontenac that we have a managed forest on. So I bring the sort of city and country to this committee and a bit of a science and math background. So, and this is my second term on Keefe. So look forward to meeting all the new people and welcoming them. It's been a fun time.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Next on my screen is Reza Jemsidi Chinari.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lane. Nice to meet you all. I'm Reza Jamshidi Chanari. I'm research fellow at Royal Military College, Canada. I am actively doing research in the field of civil engineering, more specifically geoenvironmental issues and the applications of different, geo solutions to mitigate environmental problems in the realm of civil engineering. I have also had a chance to be the chairman of the city council in a mega city, not in Canada, abroad, somewhere in Middle East. But at the moment, I'm a Canadian, fortunately.
Thank you very much, Reza. Next, I'm going to go to Diane Corrigan.
Hello, everybody. This is my first meeting, so I'm a newbie. I'm really happy to be here. I have recently retired from a 35+ year career in the environmental field. So I started out working with the Ministry of the Environment, and then I shifted to the post-secondary sector, and I headed up the environmental engineering and environmental sustainability work at Georgian College in Barrie. I'm a recent newcomer to Kingston. We moved to Kingston just prior to COVID. So I'm really excited to be on this committee and contribute in any way I can to the whole Kingston environmental field. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. Next on my screen is Beth Sills.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Beth Sills, and I'm the Director of Facilities at St. Moritz College. And within my portfolio, I have sustainability, which is very near and dear to my heart, and climate action. And I've had a couple of stints before on Keefe. The beginning of my career, I was in industry, and I was the industry rep. And then I think I was with the city for 5 years as their environmental engineer, and I was the tech rep on Keefe then. So yeah, great to be back.
Thank you very much, Beth. Next is Sarah Riding.
That's me. Good evening, everyone. Sarah Riding. I am the manager of the environmental health team at KFLNA Public Health, and I am sitting on this committee on behalf of the agency as our technical rep. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Next is Josh Cowan.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, everybody. Josh Cowan is duly noted. This is my first time on the committee. I am looking forward to being part of this. My background is not as strong in the environmental sciences as most of the people here, so I'm looking forward to lots of learning. I do sit on the board of the Little Forest Kingston, where I've been quite active. And I have a side thing that where I've been spending a lot of time learning about nature-based solutions. So Reza, I probably will be sending you an email asking for suggested readings and such, if that's all right. But thank you all. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. Next is Mike Dakin.
Thanks, Ian, and good evening, everyone. Yeah, Michael Dakin. I'm Supervisor of Development Review with Cataraqui Conservation. So I think I've been on the committee for quite a few years. I don't even know at this point how many exactly, but a few go around. And yeah, I'm excited to be on this latest iteration. I am involved primarily in reviewing development applications adjacent to natural features, water bodies, wetlands, etc., in and around the Kingston region. And I lead the team here that includes ecologists, some water resource engineers, and other staff. So we're a small shop, and I tend to represent the Conservation Authority as a whole at times. So yeah, happy to be part of the committee.
Thank you very much, Mike. Next is Ludmila Aguilera.
Good evening, everyone. I was a few minutes late because I was on another computer and then it just got frozen. I had to go grab my laptop. So I've been part of the committee for a few years now, and it's been a pleasure and an honor to contributing to solve environmental issues in Kingston and make it more sustainable. My expertise is in aquatic biology and environmental policy and aquatic invasive species, and yeah, and I'm an independent environmental consultant.
Righty, thank you very much, Ludmila. And last but not least, Jaka Suryana.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jaka Suryana. I'm an associate senior environmental engineer with Stantec Consulting. My field is in the environmental remediation and revitalization, and all my operations are actually in Alberta, both in Calgary, Edmonton, and everywhere else in Alberta. And my connection to Kingston is like met my wife at Queen's, and we love Kingston, moved to Calgary for a bit for work, and then continuing work in Calgary, but managed to work remotely from Kingston since 2016.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jaka. And actually, just as you were talking, Jessica Campbell, who is another member of the forum, has come on the call. If she would like to turn on her camera or just turn on her microphone, if you'd love to give yourself an introduction, we're just wrapping up the introductions and then we can get started.
Hi there. Sorry, apologies to be a bit late, but a toddler upstairs was trying to keep me long. I'm Jessica Campbell. Was there anything in specific that people were sharing for introductions? I can make sure I covered things, or?
Basically just any background or anything that they are interested in sharing.
Perfect, sounds good. I did an undergraduate at Queen's in environmental science, which sort of brings my interest in the subject matter of this committee. And I did a master's of public administration, and I've been working at the Ministry of Health for the last 6 years. Doing program and policy design there. And we've been in Kingston for I'm originally from the Oshawa area, and then my partner and I have been in Kingston for about 7 years now.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jessica. So with all of the introductions out of the way, I will move on to the first item of business, which is the election of officers. Do I have any volunteers or movers for a chair, please? You could just raise your hands in your camera so I can know to unmute you. No takers, eh? The position of chair is not a very formal one, and I am here as always to help run through the meeting. And if you want to just give it a shot, that's fine. Or like it's all up to you guys, but we do need a chair and we do need a vice chair to get the meeting started. David Stocks, you're wishing to volunteer? Perfect. Do I have a mover for David Stocks to be chair? Moved by Mike Dakin, seconded by Ludmila. So let me get that here. And Dakin and Ludmila. All those in favor of David Stocks as chair of the forum, please raise your hands. And that is carried. Perfect. Do I have a nomination or a volunteer for the position of vice chair, please? David Stocks? You're on mute. Sorry, David.
I have spoken to Rachel Askett, who was the vice chair at the last iteration of Keith, and she would continue in that role. So I would nominate Rachel.
Okay. Are there any other volunteers? So I have confirmed with Rachel, she is interested in the position and we can do elections in absentia. So that is okay. I just want to make sure that there is no one else that wishes for the position of vice chair at this time. And seeing none. So since you nominated her, I'm going to say that you were the mover. Can I have a seconder, please, for Rachel? Ludmila, perfect. Let me just put this in my thing here. And all right, calling the vote on Rachel Askett as vice chair of the forum. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimously carried. Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody. And I'm happy to turn it over to the chair to get the meeting started properly.
And I'm unmuted. So welcome everybody to all the new members. I think this is sort of an exciting time. Keith has been kind of in a bit of a slow period during COVID. There wasn't a lot of work. I think we had one meeting last year, but I think we've got some really exciting things coming up. So you've come on at kind of a nice time. It's a good group, and hopefully we'll meet face to face coming up. So I will call the meeting to order at 6:14. I hope people have had a chance to look over the agenda. We'll need approval of that. So I'd look for somebody to approve the agenda. Who did I see there? Mike Dakin, approving the agenda. I forget, Ian, we'll need a seconder for that, or just seconder. So Ludmila, that'd be great. Has seconded that. All those in favor of the agenda, approve the agenda. I don't see everybody's hands, but I'll assume that that's carried. Moving on to the confirmation of the minutes. And I guess, sorry, before we go on, Ian, do we need an acting vice for this meeting? No, we don't. Okay, no. So I can just sort of ask if I need to say anything and somebody to take the chair, I can Just offer up to somebody?
You can
Okay.
just offer it up, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, confirmation of the minutes held October the 3rd, 2022. There aren't a lot of us that were at that meeting, but I've taken a look at it and it does reflect the meeting and notes. So I'd ask for somebody to move that we approve those minutes, unless if somebody has any changes to that. Seeing none, I'll ask somebody. Mike, or do you have a change, or you're okay? Yeah, okay. So Michael moved that we approve the minutes from the last meeting, and a seconder. Ludmilla, that'd be great. Thank you. And all those in favor of approving those? And that would be carried. Thanks, everybody. So if you haven't sort of read your notes, disclosure of pecuniary interest is something that's on all the meetings. That's if you would have any personal knowledge about or work with or a consultant of anything that we're going to do on the agenda. So I have to ask if anybody has any pecuniary interest on any of the agenda items. And seeing none, I'll say no. Do we have any delegations?
None at this meeting, Mr. Chair.
Okay. We do have briefings in the new business. Would be the state of the environment, or are the briefings separate?
So briefings, through you, Mr. Chair, briefings are a separate item of business, and there are currently none on the agenda. However, Mr. McLatchie will be able to provide a brief introduction when we get to the business item. Okay.
Which I think now we're at the business items. So I'll turn it over to Mr. McLatchie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on your re-election. Very nice to see so many familiar faces after such a long time. My name is Paul McLatchie, and I am the City of Kingston's Environment Director. I'm joined here by other City of Kingston staff, namely Julie Salter-Keene, who is a co-presenter of this report, and Troy Stubinsky and Karen Santucci from the city's Public Works Department that oversees a number of things, including the city's forestry operations. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to just provide as fast as I can, a brief overview of some of the highlights of this version of the State of the Environment report. And before they do that, I do want to say thank you for the patience of Keefe members, and especially Councillor Sanik. I know you've been more than patient in waiting for this to come back to Keefe through the delay that was caused by the pandemic. But so let's jump right in. Let's go to the next slide, please. So as a matter of background, the terms of reference for the State of the Environment report and the first draft 2019 State of the Environment report were received by Keefe in 2019 and then in 2020 for the draft report. Keefe started a process of breaking off into working groups to provide review comments back to staff. And we did receive some really excellent comments from that process. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, the project was put on hold, mainly due to a loss of staff resources during the pandemic. We had a couple of interns that were dedicated to this work, and unfortunately, they left the city when the pandemic was in its deepest and darkest. So the State of the Environment report has now been recreated with data from 2021 and 2022, and it's and we've included wherever we can input from Keefe's 2020 reviews. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the the purpose of the State of the Environment report, and I am aware that many people are new to Keefe and you don't have the history on this, but the purpose of the State of the Environment report was to provide one location for a high-level snapshot of available data that provides quantitative indications of local environmental quality over time. It provides access to data trends over time where that information is available. And we've committed to providing brief commentaries for each of the environmental metrics that are included. So that provides context for the data and presents any important highlights about data quality or specific causes of why the data is the way it is. And really, we want the report to assist Keefe in your decision making, but also in increasing local knowledge of local environmental conditions and to help inform decision making as well. Next slide, please. In describing what the State of the Environment report is, it's important to recognize what it's not. It's not an exhaustive examination of individual environmental issues. That would be thousands and thousands of pages if it were. It's more of a gateway, providing high-level information that allows people to go on that further assessment journey. It's not a comprehensive list of all environmental metrics that may or could potentially exist. Important to recognize that the environmental metrics that were chosen for the State of the Environment report were chosen based on a set of criteria in the terms of reference. And one of the key aspects of those criteria is the data has to exist, has to be collected by an organization, and has to be reliably obtainable. So for the most part, the city doesn't have the resources to go out and start collecting new data and putting it together. And that's not what we intended to do with this. And lastly, I'd remind everybody that it's not an environmental action plan. It can support the development of environmental action plans, but it's not the purpose of the report to do that. Next slide, please. So the 2023 version of the State of Environment Data Report, it continues with the 6 theme areas that were part of the original terms of reference, those being air quality, climate, land, biodiversity, water, and waste. Some of the metrics that were included in 2020 have been removed from this report, mostly because they either don't provide direct indications of environmental quality, or perhaps were not broad enough in scope, or simply because data was no longer available. The metrics that have not been included in this most recent version of the report are the respiratory admissions to local hospitals. That was an iffy metric from the start, and with COVID, that's really just gotten even more muddy. We have removed the estimates of greenhouse gas emission reductions from Sustainable Kingston's program, mostly because it represents a small slice of GHG emission reductions in the city, and there are other programs that are also doing that. So it's not particularly broad in scope there. And renewable energy projects as well. Since FIT and microfit and the large renewable energy contracts were rolled up, there really hasn't been a lot of growth in information about renewable energy projects. I'm sure they're still out there, but the IESO is not providing information on that anymore. We also removed new housing starts and fire events because they weren't really terribly indicative of environmental issues in the city. Per capita water use, recognizing that it's always good to use less, but again, not a direct indication of any particular environmental threat to water quality. And our stormwater quality bacteriological testing, that's something the city had done for years, but now with our new consolidated environmental compliance approvals for stormwater management in the city, we don't do that any longer. We're working with the ministry to come up with a new monitoring regime, and hopefully that'll be finalized later this year. But that data collection is no longer available, so we've dropped that. Next slide, please. And one of the other major differences is that comparisons to other cities was not included in the 2023 report. It's quite resource intensive to go out to other cities and ask for that data. And we're not always sure that observed differences between cities is actually attributable to an aspect of environmental performance. It might be attributable to demographic or geographic or other types of differences. But we still think it's an important part of the State of Environment report going forward. And we've recognized that we need to do additional work in this area so that we can identify the most appropriate comparator cities and also the most appropriate metrics, because I don't think all metrics in the report are worthy of doing those or cross-city comparisons. Next slide, please. So the good, or at least the encouraging parts of the report, I think, are definitely seeing that continued improving air quality in Kingston year after year, which is excellent. That's the Air Quality Health Index numbers, which are a combination of the fine particulate matter, ground level ozone, and one other thing I can't remember now. We're also seeing continuing reductions in our community GHG emissions, which is excellent. But of course, we still have a long way to go to reach our 2040 carbon neutrality goals. And anybody that's read the latest IPCC report knows that from a global perspective, things are not looking great from a climate perspective. We do see definite increases in local electric vehicle adoption, which is encouraging. We also see net positive tree planting and on city lands, and a stable urban forest cover from 2011 to 2021. And also we see sewer overflow events have been reducing year after year. And that is notable because that's in the face of increasing levels of precipitation. Next slide, please. Some areas that the report indicates we should be keeping a watch on. Residential waste diversion at 60%, that's good. The city is aiming for 65%, but we have a lot of regulatory changes coming up. That's going to change the way a lot of curbside waste collection and waste management is done. So that's, in the next couple of years, as that really starts to be implemented, we're going to have to watch to see what that waste diversion rate does. Transit ridership, of course, is way down. That's a pandemic artifact. And the challenge on Kingston Transit is to get people back on the bus, because that's an important part of our climate action. Frequency of extreme weather events in Kingston is likely increasing, although we do need in future State of the Environment reports to have a much longer historical data set, I think, to properly evaluate that. Ontario's electricity emission factors are going back up. Well, that's the amount of carbon that's emitted per kilowatt hour of energy produced. And that threatens all our investments in electrification if we start to see those carbon numbers creeping up with electricity. And we've also noticed some data gaps. In Ontario, there really is literally no access to waste data from businesses, industry, or institutions, the so-called ICI sector. I don't think that's something we can solve, but it's definitely a problem if a city wants to manage its waste and use its waste as a resource. It's difficult to figure out how much waste is really out there. From a habitat perspective, we have a reasonable ability to quantify the amount of protected areas within the city, but don't have a good indicator of what the quality of that habitat is, other than qualitative descriptions of certain types of habitat. From a biodiversity perspective, we again have more qualitative data about the types of species that are on threatened or endangered lists, or the type of invasive species that are around. That information doesn't change very much from year to year, so difficult to see trends. Next slide, please. So what's next with the 2023, or sorry, with the State of the Environment Data Report? Keith's review and commentary, of course, is super important and is needed to improve next year's State of the Environment Report. And so we are expecting, although Keith may choose to do this however you wish. We're expecting Keith to break into some sort of working group format or something to tackle those theme areas and to provide commentary back to staff so that we can make next year's report even better. And as it's mentions in the recommendation of the Keith report, the staff report to Keith tonight, we can put a lot of the core metrics within the State of the Environment report on the Kingston In Focus data portal, which is a public-facing data portal run through a cooperative relationship between Queen's and Queen's University. And some of the environmental metrics that are in the State of the Environment report are actually already there. So that is it for me in terms of a high-level introduction of the State of Environment, this year's State of the Environment report. Again, I do want to apologize for the delay in getting it to the committee. And I hope that you find it interesting. And I hope that we can start to discuss how to make it better. And happy to take any questions this evening.
Josh has a question.
First off, thank you very much, Mr. McLachie, for I've never met you in person, but it's nice to meet you. And thank you and your staff for putting together this effort. I forgive me, I will ask a few questions. And Mr. Chairman, let me know if I'm kind of going where I shouldn't be going, because I'm new to all of this. I guess the first question I have is, has the terms of reference actually been accepted and approved by Keith for this report?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the terms of reference was accepted by Keith in 2019. And as I described, some of the aspects of that terms of reference have changed within this latest report. I don't think the fundamental substance of the report has changed, but in terms of the terms of reference that was approved, there's some tweaks. Yeah.
So then, does that mean that the terms of reference are changeable, or are they? This is more me trying to understand process than anything else. I had understood that if the terms of reference were accepted as one thing, then would it need to go back to Keith for changes in the terms of reference, and or are those terms of reference changeable going forward?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the terms of reference are a living document. And I think as part of Keith's review of the State of the Environment report, any recommendations to modify the terms of reference to accommodate the types of comments that Keith is providing, I think are on side.
Okay. Then the next question I have is Mr. Chairman, maybe this is a question to you, and again, forgive me, I'm just trying to get on top of this. Sorry, let me just be somewhat blunt and then and just ask for help, if I might. I read the report. I'm very uncomfortable with the use of the word biodiversity for the metrics that are there, because it doesn't feel to me that we're measuring that. And so I saw that the agreement to how we measure things and what we're measuring are referenced in the terms of reference, which is part of why I asked my earlier question. And so I'm just wondering, from a process standpoint, is it that we will break into little groups, we'll discuss biodiversity? For example, let's say I want to be on the biodiversity group. We'll discuss biodiversity, and then what the subgroup recommends to Mr. McLachie or whomever, the city council, is then considered and either chosen to do with or not. Is that basically how the process is going to go? I'm not sure when I raise issues about the report, because, for example, with biodiversity and Mr. McLachie, I mean no disrespect at all, but it doesn't seem to me to be measuring biodiversity in the city, basically. And so I fear that the release of a report that uses a title of biodiversity is misleading for other folks. If it was labeled as, public trees, but measurement of public trees on public works, and other, that's one thing, but this doesn't feel like it measures biodiversity. But I don't know whether this is even the right time and forum for me to raise this. So that's really my question, is when do I get to raise this? Not that I'm trying to force the conversation now.
Okay, I'll maybe try that, Josh. First of all, I really appreciate your question and your interest in the topic and the clarity that you want to bring to the State of the Environment report. I'm trying to remember back when we did the terms of reference, because I think there were some changes that we proposed, but there were also some kind of standard things that were happening in other State of the Environment reports, or labels that other people were using. And so we did kind of have to use some of those terms and definitions maybe at certain points. So I think something that's there that you or the group that sort of reviews that area, or of us, we might be on that committee too. I think you could have input on future iterations of this, because I like your idea of, if we're talking about the number of trees, then let's call it trees. And if it's urban trees, even better. But you also get into a situation where if everybody else is talking about their biodiversity and talking about, and it sort of gets lumped into that, then maybe some of those metrics, that's what other people are sort of calling them. But I think that would be something that maybe not for this report, but as going forward, looking at it and clarifying the things that we could actually report on. So some of the things might have been from our earlier iteration that we actually wanted to have more biodiversity and look at other metrics, but those just might not be available. And so, clarifying what we call something in the State of the Environment report based on the metrics that we can use and that are available and are reliable might also change some of those terms. I don't know, Mr. McClatchy, does that sort of fit with what you might have remembered? And
yes, it does. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations, Josh. I think you've gotten to the nut of some of the shortcomings of this report, and that is that there really was a struggle to find good, robust metrics that quantitatively describe biodiversity at a local level.
Okay, sorry, I'll just shut up after this one last question, Jessica, sorry. But just, so what I'm hearing is that that the report will go out with the word biodiversity on it. I view that as a, okay, what, I don't want to cause problems, but that the second part is that the conversation for how recommendations we could make better are for going forward when we break out into groups. From a process standpoint, that's really my question. And sorry, and that when we have those discussions, we can keep in mind that the terms of reference is a living document. And so we don't necessarily have to be beholden to the way that document was putting in definitions. If that's all true, then that's great. I'll shut up.
I would say that that's all true.
Okay, thank you.
Ian, I'm not sure if you're keeping track, or does the hand signs go up in order? I've got
roughly,
Jessica.
yes, Mr. Chair. So I would say, if you want to kind of make a speaking list, I would say it would go Jessica, then Diane, then Mike, then Reza.
I love that the computer does that for me because Beth's now been added to the bottom of that list. So that, not that you were near the bottom ever, but Jessica, welcome, and you have a question.
I just wanted to add on to Josh's point and maybe ask a clarifying question. I should have said in my introductions, I have previously worked in policy for the Ministry of Natural Resources doing species at risk policy and in intergovernmental affairs in the Ministry of Environment. So my question to Josh's point was, in the data that the city looked at for biodiversity tracking, was there, do we know whether staff had looked at the option of using the Natural Heritage Information Center as a resource? And it's okay if not, I'm only aware of that through work. So, but that's a provincial center run by the Ministry of Natural Resources that maintains lists of, I've just pulled it up here, but it maintains lists of endangered species, but also has maps available for different species, and it maintains lists of species in Ontario. It's quite robust. A lot of it might be a little bit spotty and might be based on observations, but anyone can submit observations and they do get filtered out, or the data is maintained by the ministry. Just wondering if that's an option to help with Josh's concern there.
Just as a background for everybody before maybe Mr. McClatchy answers that question directly, but that's exactly the type of information that in our committees that we brought forward, if there were expertise that people knew about from our technical representatives, they were very good to sort of say, oh, we've got a great metric that we use on whatever, and would bring that to the committee. But then it would be up to the city to see if that metric fit with what the state of the environment could use and would use. So I'll let Paul answer that question directly.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. And thanks for that question, Jessica. And to be to the point, no, we did not tap into the Natural Heritage Resource Center. It sounds interesting, and I'd like to explore that. Our species information came from the various the list of species in the Ontario and Canadian regulations for threatened and endangered species at risk. And then invasive species came from the EDD maps inventory, and also iNaturalist observation inventory. So observational, and as I said before, I think it's still it can be improved for sure if we want to get at a quantitative description of species biodiversity.
Does that answer your question, Jessica? Are you okay?
Yes,
to go
thank
forward?
you. I recognize too, it's tough. The data sets are always observational, and the work you're doing to find data sets is always a tough one. So I'll recognize that for sure.
Thank you for bringing your expertise to the group, and we'll look forward to researching that going forward. That would be great. Diane, welcome to you, and you've got a question.
Yes, thanks so much. First of all, I just wanted to say congratulations on pulling information from all different sources, and with the city's partners and all of that. I know it's a lot of work pulling information over such a broad area, so congratulations on that. I do have a question though about, from my reading, I understand that the draft of this report was already submitted to Keith. I forget the date. So this is actually a final report, is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes. So the 2019 version of the report was provided to Keith in draft for review. And we have review comments from Keith for that. And we've issued this report, not in draft, which is populated with data from 2021 and 2022. And as I mentioned, wherever possible, we've incorporated the review comments from Keith.
Okay, perfect. That's great. So has this been, I was reading some stuff in the media a couple of days ago about this report. So has this been then in fact released in some formal way to the public?
Through you, Mr. Chair, its release is via this committee.
Okay.
Once we're finished here this evening, if the recommendations of the report to Keefe are accepted, then we can move on with placing some of those core metrics on the Kingston in Focus data portal. And I don't have an objection to seeing if we can post the actual report on the city's website on the environmental page or something.
Okay, thanks. That helps clear up the process. So thank you.
Just Ian, through you, does the Keefe recommendation have to go up to, I forget their name of it, transport or something? Keefe is really sort of a committee below another committee. And so,
yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, the recommendation as printed on the agenda and before the committee, when we get to that portion after all the questions and everything, will direct this to the Environment, Infrastructure and Transportation Policies Committee, which will then be the kind of final check mark for some of the items within the motion itself. But yes, it reports directly to the EITP committee.
And does then it have to go to council and council then approves it?
There, through you, Mr. Chair, there is nothing in the motion that directs it to council. So it will go to the EITP committee for final approval, but probably after this, some of the metrics will probably be made online with at least Keefe's approval.
Okay, great. Diane, is that sufficient for your question? Okay, great. Mr. Dakin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick comments. Having been involved in the previous review in terms of reference in the 2019 draft version and completely forgetting that I was involved in that, I did quickly look up those comments and I am now seeing that, as Mr. McClatchy noted, many of the comments that Keefe raised in 2019 were either directly addressed in the new draft or the new 2023 report, or there's commentary added in the Keefe report where Mr. McClatchy's indicated that in the future considerations will be made in how to explore additional revisions and data collection, et cetera. So it to me, at least, it's quite clear that although not everything was addressed for 2023, but in the future will be efforts made to expand, I guess, the scope of the State of the Environment report, and hopefully we can contribute to that as Keefe members. And the last thing I wanted to say, just as a note and a plug for the Conservation Authority, we did release our 2023 watershed report card just recently. So that, again, it's at a high level, pretty broad scale, and of course at the watershed level, but it does cover the entire extent of the city of Kingston. So just recommend all members, in fact, and certainly Paul, having regard for the findings in the report card. There's certainly information that I think could be helpful in biodiversity reporting. For example, we look at forest conditions and wetland cover in the various watersheds in our jurisdiction. And also for the water category, we report on groundwater quality from the provincial groundwater quality monitoring network. So anyways, just a reference to some additional data there. The last one we did, I think, was 2018. So we're on a similar timeline, I guess, as the city, but hopefully supplementary and helpful information. Thanks.
That might have been the report that you saw, Diane. Don't know, but I think next up is Reza. And Reza, just as clarification, are you a community member or an RMC technical delegate? Happy to have you as both, but.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't follow you. What was the first part of your question?
We've got technical representatives from Queens and RMC, and you've met some of them from the Conservation and Ministry of the Environment, and so
okay.
And so I didn't know whether your RMC position was as a technical rep or as a community. member?
No, I do not represent my employer. I mean, I just work there, and I represent, I'm just a community member.
That's great.
Yeah.
Welcome.
So thank you very much, David. And first of all, I really appreciate, the great amount of work put together to prepare such a comprehensive report. I read the report, from the very beginning to the very end, and I found, lots of merits in these comprehensive report. Having said that, I would say there are some areas which I could say, from critical point of view, there are some, metrics which could be, either, the core metrics or secondary metrics could be added or introduced into the revised version of the, the report. So I think because my review of this report, has got 7 main comments. I'm not sure if the time would allow me to raise all these comments. So I will try to, start with the most important, question I have here, in the, theme area number 5, which is water. I realized that the report has aptly covered the topic of road salt consumption. This is a very, a crucially important issue globally, covered by experts and, policymakers. I've read lots of reports in this area. However, what's missing from this report is the adverse impact of the road salt consumption on our watersheds and lakes. I mean, I don't see any information around the salinity of our waters. For example, one would ask about the concentration of chlorine or sodium, per liter in Lake Ontario or other, water resources in the city of Kingston. Because based on the information I have got, I mean, the global information I have got, the statistics are daunting, because the road salt consumption has got a long-lasting detrimental impact on the salinity of our waters, and it cannot be recovered. This is one of the questions. So I think we better move forward thematically in the order of presentation in the report. So yeah.
Reza, I might just interrupt you there and just say that I think what you're bringing is important information and expertise, but I think I'd remind you that, as Paul said, the report is not comprehensive. And I think that will be the job of Keith going forward, is do we need more information in certain areas for public consumption that would further enhance the report and provide background information without being the 1,000-page report, would be my comment there. That I think some of your or if your other sort of suggestions are similar, that I think that's something, once we get the report out and we sort of review it again as a group going forward, we could maybe say we think we need a little bit more information here, we need to take some back there, we need to have some background. Paul, what do you think of that?
Yeah, David, what I'm saying is that, you could simply measure the concentrations of some ions in the, in our water resources, like chlorine or sodium per liter. I mean, milligram per liter, that's an indicative of the quality of the salinity of water. So it's not, difficult or to measure. And at the same time, that's a very important, metric which will somehow reflect the detrimental impact of the, road salt consumption, annually inflicted in our city and every single city of the world. And that's the reason I talked about, this metric.
Paul, do you know whether that metric was available or whether it's something that the group did look at?
I think there is some data available. There is provincial stream water quality monitoring network data that's available. And it would surprise me if chloride was not in that list. The issue with that is that the samples are not collected, as far as I know, on the same times every year. So I'm guessing that there's a lot of seasonal variation in chloride concentrations. But I think it's an excellent comment. That would be an excellent metric to look at to be able to gauge the actual impacts of road salt use.
Thanks, Paul. David, could I ask another question? Because my comments, are not limited to just one. However, I know time is limited, and others, other members have lots of important, comments to raise. So if you would allow me, I would, ask another, one more question.
Sure, and understanding that, you will have. We want to have all of your input and from all of your questions, but maybe you're also getting a better understanding of what we can change of this report, or and that those questions will be valuable going forward. So yes, please go ahead with one more question.
Thank you very much. The other area which was aptly covered in this report was, theme area number 6, which is about the wastes or municipal solid waste, whatever you would call it. I noticed that the main, point of, the main point of emphasis of this report is around the residential waste diversion rate, which is an important metric. It's 60% of our solid waste diverting from landfills and getting into, getting recycled. That's excellent. However, one issue which concerns me is that, at least, at the time being, we could say that 40% of our solid wastes are destined into our landfills. So it would be very nice if we would, or citizens would know about the, volume of, solid waste heading into our landfills, and see the trends, and, reporting only the diversion rate is not the only important metric to be reported. I mean, we do need to know if the volume of our landfills are expanding or not. And also the amount of leachate generating out of the, municipal solid waste degeneration, that would be nice to be reported. I'm not sure if such information would be available or it would be, a viable, metric, because based on my personal experience from, working globally, I know it's a measurable metric, and it's not difficult to measure it, as long as the landfill would be, designed, engineered properly. So thank you very much. This is another area, which concerns me, and I would, appreciate if some more clarification would be.
Great. Probably directed to Mr. McClatchy for that one.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Total waste tonnages, we as a municipality, we pay for that. when it goes to landfill, so we can definitely access that data. There's no doubt in my mind that we could add that to the next State of the Environment report. Leachate might be a little bit more difficult because landfill waste goes to different landfills. They're all private landfills. We don't run our own municipal landfill. So trying to determine the amount of leachate produced from the waste that we contribute might be tricky. But we'll look into that.
Thank you. Ms. Sills.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to congratulate Paul and the city on pulling this together. I can imagine, you know, the number of hours just even deciding on you know, what the theme should be and what the metrics are, and then trying to get reliable data ongoing. So I really appreciate all the effort, and I do think it's really valuable for people to have this quick snapshot of you know, where Kingston is. I was just going to add just a few comments. I see within the climate part, in when you break it down, you know, by the different emission areas of climate, you talk about the impact from the pandemic. So I just thought maybe it'd be good to have a little bit of commentary in the upfront when you just refer to that number, because what I'm concerned is in the pandemic, all the numbers went down, and you know, hopefully they don't go back up when we look at 22, 23, but just maybe have a commentary in there so people aren't surprised, just because the pandemic did have a big impact. And then I really like the way they presented the extreme weather, and I think it's really nice to have that trend, and that's going to really inform, you know, what we need to be thinking about as a community for adaptation. So I thought that was really nice to see that all presented in such a concise way. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you. I see Councillor Osanik, but I think technically we've got to wait till the end for your question. So, and pardon my pronunciation, Jaka, is that how it's pronounced?
Mr. Chair, it's actually as simple as Jaka. That's how it is. People always make it complicated.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but
welcome, and you've got a question.
I do, just with what I'm doing professionally. Like, I'm interested in the brownfield section of the report, and just out of curiosity, like the brownfield community improvement plan, when was it started? That's like my first question. And based on the figure that we have there, figure 11 on the brownfield, the indication is pretty good that, yeah, we had some lands. We have like a small area of land remediated during the COVID time, but starting in 2021, 2022, it seems like there are more and more activities. So I'm just, I'm glad to see that there are a lot of brownfield activities within the city of Kingston, given that we're a pretty established city and a lot of historical industrial operations and everything. But yeah, I'm just curious if the brownfield community improvement plan has actually engaged the public or the developers to kind of like do more remediation within the city of Kingston.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for that question, Jaka. The Kingston's Brownfield CIP was created in 2005. And for the first 10 years of its existence, we did a lot of outreach to developers and the public. It's been very well subscribed. Our treasurer might say too well subscribed. So we don't promote it as much as we used to, but it's still going strong.
Okay, that's great to know. Yeah, that's good from my end. And I'm a technical reviewer within the environmental consulting company. I mean, there is a typo on the redevelopment on the per sentence of that brownfield section. Sorry, I just have to point it out. I'm an engineer, so.
Thank you.
No,
That was pointed out by Councillor Chaves to my chagrin.
Okay.
There was a couple of typos.
yeah,
Thank
we
you.
look forward to your expertise, Jacob. Josh, back to you.
Sorry, I promise this will be quick. It's a process question for you, Mr. Chairman, actually, is can you just explain, is the process that will happen with this report and or the process that will happen with us breaking out, and do we have access to staff when we it sounded to me like what happens is we get together, we talk about stuff, we make recommendations, it goes to staff then either agrees to the recommendations or doesn't, and then the report comes out and we say thank you for the report. And I'm just curious whether there's more back and forth or opportunities for more in-depth conversations so that we can understand why some indicators were chosen and such. So this is for going forward. I'm not suggesting this for the report that's currently being concerned. And if this is going to be discussed some other time, I'm happy to have you tell me that and I'll shut up.
In the past, we've done both of those things where we've had committees report back to staff and staff's come back to the individual committee and sort of said, yeah, you can do that, and yes, it's a good idea, and we'll put it in, or might come back and say, sorry, no, you can't do that, it's not available, and so the committee would have to adjust that, and I'm not sure how the review is going to happen for this report or the report going forward, because we really haven't met as a group yet, and that hasn't been broken out. So that would be at a further meeting where we would decide the number of committees and what the role of those committees would be and what influence they might have.
And just to be clear, the implication is that we accept, to the extent that we have any say in this, and I'm not trying to push us where we don't belong, but we are in effect, by having this report sent here today and us talking about it, there's no point in this where we say, oh, well, we love what Paul and his staff did. Forgive me if Mr. McClatchy, don't mean to presume. But like, for example, in my case where I'm Johnny one note on this doesn't really measure biodiversity. I'd love if it did more than the acknowledgement at the end to say, you know, this is not an indicator of biodiversity in my mind. Now, I know you made a reference to it, sir, later at the end, and I think that was good. But is there a place for that, or is it not appropriate for Keith to do that? I'm sorry, forgive me. I need to understand.
No. This is in the classroom. If one student was asking a question, I knew that there was another 10 that had the same question. So thank you for asking the question, because I'm sure everybody else appreciates it. And I'll maybe direct it to Mr. Sullivan, because my understanding is that once this sort of a report comes in, we don't have a lot of say about changes to it, that it does have to get kind of either okayed or voted down. We either sort of forward it on, or we say no, it's got to go back.
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, a finalized report like this, the actual information inside the report can never be amended, as that's changing staff's wording within a report. A recommendation can be amended. In this case, because of what the recommendation is saying, really the only ones that would be in order would be approval or denial. And if you were to say, for example, vote down the recommendation in front of you, it would go up to the committee, the EITP committee, with just a negative recommendation as opposed to a positive recommendation. Moving forward with other types of projects, staff will bring, for example, a draft report, and comments made by Keith will be then used to build on that going forward. So kind of what the experience would have been when the initial reports were being created for the state of the environment. And hopefully that answered your question.
Great. Jessica, back to you.
Thank you. Just one other quick question. I was wondering whether and how the metrics that are used in this report align with any metrics for evaluating the city's climate leadership plan. I'm thinking that if those two things, it would be of value for city staff to have those two things aligned, given that the purpose of this report is meant to aid decision making, and I'm thinking a lot of the decision making around climate change in the city is probably going to be based around that climate leadership plan.
So through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, luckily we have Julie Salter-King with us here tonight, and she is the manager of the Climate Leadership Division. I know for a fact that the community GHG emissions is a key metric in the Climate Leadership Plan, as well as this State of the Environment report, but I'm hoping Julie can elaborate on that.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly the report, working with Mr. McClatchy on it, we looked at the Climate Leadership Plan and the recommendations within the plan and the actions. And a number of those actions, like the GHG emission reductions, the discussion around drought and the rural wells, were certainly taken into consideration, which were also identified in the Climate Leadership Plan and the Adaptation and Resilience section of the plan.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Great. Councillor Osanik, you are up. Welcome to the Keefe meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for letting me crash this meeting. As Director Paul McClatchy said, I was on Keefe from 2006 to 2010, and the very first environmental scorecard came out in 2009. And then I've been like waiting for this all these years, right, like for the next rendition. So happy to see it. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just have a couple of questions, and one is probably to the other David in our group, right? Because David Arnott, you're at MOH. So when we have like the spills in Kingston reported by year, do you think that is the spills that like get called in to MOE, or would it be the spills that are verified by MOE as actually being spills? The reason why I ask is that in Collins Bay, we had a spill in 2018. The residents, saw like a film of oil on the water, and I reported it on their behalf to the spill action line. It took 2 days for the spill action line to get back to me. And then because it was 2 days later, they said that they didn't see any evidence of the spill. Probably by that time, the waves had washed it out, right? So I'm just wondering, the data in this chart, right, on page 10, would it be spills that had been verified, or would this just be spills like me making the phone call to report a spill that was seen immediately?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. I suspect that those statistics are spills that were reported to the ministry and that are logged by the Spills Action Center. And then depending on the severity of the spill, there may or may not be a field response that goes along with that. That would then verify that the spill has occurred, and if there's any actions that are required at that point for cleanups or assessments, then those actions are undertaken. But for the purposes of those statistics, I suspect I can look into that for sure and confirm, but I suspect they're probably spills that got called in or logged, and then a report generated to determine the total number within a given geographic area.
Okay, thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Chair, my next question, I guess, would be to Director McClatchy. So for the days of beach closure, so we didn't have any then, like last year in 2022, because I think like one of the beaches, it doesn't say here what the beaches are, but I think one of the beaches is like Crear Beach off of like Lakeshore Boulevard. And I know some of the days last summer, that water was really icky. And it's the Kingston Health Unit, right? Are they the ones that still do the beach testing, and do they do it just once a week, or like maybe just those days the beach was icky wasn't one of the days that they came out? I just find it hard to believe that there were no beach closures at all last year.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad Sarah Riding's on the meeting here tonight. But yeah, that's understanding. The health unit goes out once a week and tests for the various bacteriological parameters, and if they exceed the provincial standard for swimming, then they notify the city, and the city closes, or not, we don't close the beach, but we post the beach and advise people not to swim.
Thanks. Okay, and I just find it weird how 2020 there were so many beach closures compared to all the other years going back to 2018.
Sarah,
We have
are
no
you,
explanation, eh?
Sarah, do you know anything about that might aid Mr. McClatchy?
Thank you. I don't have my my results right in front of me, so I apologize, but I don't have our results. I'm assuming, Mr. McClatchy, that this information was gathered from the health unit's website. Is that correct, or was that a freedom of information request?
Oh no, this is records that are derived from the health units
from the website. Okay.
They notify the city's environment division of when beaches need to be posted.
Right. Yeah. And I do just want to clarify that process is not actually closing the beach, but as you mentioned, that the results exceed the ministry's level or their standard, and the beaches are recommended for not swimming. There's a different process where a beach is actually closed, and so for any of those instances, they weren't truly closed. They were posted not safe for swimming, just to clarify. And yes, it is once weekly. All of the public beaches within the health unit are sampled. And we also do a survey at the time to take into consideration things like, dead waterfowl or whatever else our staff may encounter when they're taking their water samples.
I see. So thanks for that information, Sarah, because maybe then the reason why 2020 had so many days of beach closure was in that summer of 2020, we had all the physical distancing, right? At the height of COVID, where you couldn't even go to the beach, right? Like they had closed beaches because, like the same way that we closed for a few months, the conservation areas, no one was supposed to get close to each other. So maybe 2020 is not so much an indication of bad water quality. It might be because the beach was closed, right? Like you said, there's a difference between closing the beach, you have the sign up, you cannot be on the beach, versus just a warning, of your own precaution. Maybe.
Sarah, follow up or?
No,
sorry, I was unmuted there. I'm not certain, and maybe Mr. McClatchy could help because I actually had a question about the numbers. I didn't recall so many instances of exceedances for that particular year. So I'm not, again, I don't have my results. I can dig them up for 2020, but I think it would just depend on the data set that was accessed. So I'll let Mr. McClatchy answer.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
one important takeaway there, it's not beach closures, it's beach postings. Make a note of that. That'll be corrected in future reports. And they are strictly days of beach postings. Because of sampling undertaken by the health unit, then it's not postings because of COVID or anything like that. But because it is days of beach postings, what you're seeing in 2020 is, as if I recall correctly, there were a number of beaches like Grass Creek that were posted for a number of days. So the postings were, I think, for Grass Creek at one point in the summer, the postings were in place for 2 weeks at Grass Creek. So that would really drive the numbers up. Whereas in other years, the adverse conditions seem to clear quicker.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Like if someone was to ask us like what happened there, sounds like none of us really know, right? Just one of those things that happened in the summer of 2020. Okay, my next question then is for our diversion rates, when exactly would we be getting the 2022 data? Because I see that we just have up to 2021. I just wondered when 2022 comes available.
Thanks for that question. Yeah, they should be available any week now.
Okay, and would we then add it, Mr. McClatchy, or would we, like, we wouldn't, I guess this is final version, so we wouldn't add 2022, eh?
We would include it in the next year's report.
Okay, thank you. I think then through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to also say, like, about biodiversity. Yeah, I'm now knowing that there'll be like a little working group, you know, for some of these things. I know that we can definitely come up with some metrics for biodiversity, so that it's not just the number of trees that we planted. I did see that chart that we have in the Appendix B that shows that we're like highly reliant as a city on maple trees compared to all the other species. And that totally worries me that if we get something like the emerald ash borer, you know, that like a third of our urban forest could be wiped out. I think that's something that we as a city, not necessarily Keefe, but we have to look at that, because there is something called the maple something borer, and I hope that that doesn't create havoc to it. One question for you, Mr. McClatchy, is the blue-green algae events. So we have one observation in 2021. How does that get reported? Like, is it only the number of times someone has actually called the city about a blue-green algae? How would we even know that there was only one observation in 2021?
Thank you for that question. Through you, Mr. Chair. The way blue-green algae incidents get reported is the city during the algae, the spring and summer algae season, the city sends out a technician, and we inspect certain city locations, marinas and whatnot, to look for visual observations of blue-green algae. But we also receive calls or contacts from citizens, and we go out and have a look based on those calls, and both are recorded as incidents if blue-green algae is actually present, and if it's sampled and the Ministry of Environment confirms that it is a cyanobacteria blue-green algae. And I also wanted to point out that we have Director Karen Santucci here from Public Works, and I believe she wanted to make a comment with respect to your tree question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Arsenik. I just wanted to say that our forestry staff are very aware of diversity, and they spend a lot of time picking the right species and making sure that they are distributing that through the 55 different species that we use to plant throughout the city. So they are planting all of the different types of species. We do find on private property that often there is more of one type of species than others, and residents typically go to species they know. But as our group, we're trying to plant as many different species as we can.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Arsenik. Any further questions or comments about the report? Seeing none, I will ask for a mover and seconder for the State of the Environment reporting report to move on to the next level. And I have a mover. Anybody? You just put up a hand. Beth Sills moves. And Ludmila, a seconder. You're not second in our hearts, Ludmila. You're always number one. All those in favor of moving the report forward? I believe that's carried. Thank you all. Number B is an appointment to the North Kingstown Secondary Plan Working Group. Keith has one spot available for that committee. Does anyone on the committee have an interest in that? Have you looked at it? It looks like an exciting opportunity. There's lots of brown fields in that spot, Jacob, if you want to get involved.
And through you, Mr. Chair, just wanted to also kind of remind the committee, it's just the final, I just have my notes here, some final stages of the secondary plan for the North Kingstown area. And that will just be a big planning document that says the development of the area. Only about 3 or 4 meetings are expected for the rest of the year, and it should be done by the end of the year. So it's just a 1-year commitment, and it's only about 3 or 4 meetings.
What sort of expertise or participation is being looked for there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, any. They just would like a member of the Kingston Environment Advisory Forum to be included on the working group, and so everyone brings the same amount of expertise to them.
Do you know if the meetings are virtual or in person?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to my knowledge, they are virtual. Once we kind of know who the person is, we will get in contact with our colleagues over in planning services who will arrange for the meeting itself.
Okay. Okay. Josh, you had your hand up.
Sorry, forgive me. I did review that document really quickly, but wasn't quite clear. It looked like it had already gone through a whole bunch of iterations and was kind of at the point of just finalizing it. Am I wrong in that understanding?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I don't really have much of an answer there. I will, however, state it is in the final stages, but there is still opportunity for comments and changes to be made if needed. So your expertise is still very much valued by the other members of the working group as well going forward on that project.
Thank you.
Did this group has it been running then for the last term, and so this is just a new membership because of the new council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to my knowledge, the North Kingstown Secondary Plan Working Group was suspended during a large period of the pandemic and only started to ramp up last year. And the committee the forum never met during a period of the year last year where we could get an appointment to the working group. We now are this year. So that's why this has come at this point in time.
Okay. So I guess I'd ask the group again if anybody has any interest, might live in the area. Jessica, you'd be interested in doing it?
I would.
That would be great. Seeing nobody else, you should always sit on your hands in these meetings, Jessica. No, I say that facetiously because it's great. Yeah. Do we need to move and appoint somebody, Mr. Sullivan, or?
Yes, please. Just a mover and seconder that she be appointed to the North Kingstown Secondary Working Group.
Then I would move that Jessica is appointed to that. Ludmilla, do you want to go for 100% seconder for the meeting? Yes, Ludmilla's in. All right. Almost 7:30. Any motions? I don't think so.
Mr. Chair, no motions were received at the time of printing of the agenda. For all the committee members, motions that appear under here have to be delivered to the clerk by writing before the agenda is printed. However, notices of motion can be made, but those also need to be in print so that I can have them and be able to provide them to the public. So that's just kind of a point of clarification there. So there are no motions, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And no notices of motion, I would assume, as well. Okay. Other business? I was talking to Josh earlier, or Ian, about this, and Rachel and I are on the climate working group, and we will in a future meeting bring you up to date with what we've been doing or what committees we've been on that. Again, we'll do that in writing prior to the meeting, and if any of you have any ideas like that you want to bring forward, you could either just email me and I would ask for any clarification and we can get it on the meeting agenda. But we need to do that. We do need to do that in writing. So that's great. I don't think we have any correspondence. The date of the next meeting will be determined. So I thank you all for your participation.
Mr. Chairman,
sorry, Josh, go ahead.
Sorry, and I also see Reza has their hand raised as well.
Oh, I didn't. Not on. Okay, go ahead.
Just a quick question: when does it get to? I'm all interested in getting to work on this next project, on this report card, the SOE, and I would rather us do it sooner rather than later. So I guess I'm asking a process question: how do I, as just a member of this committee, speed that process along?
I go back to Mr. Sullivan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you can converse with members of staff where they are on terms of their project timescales. But in a matter like this, it would be quite a long, I wouldn't expect to see it for a little while longer. I'm obviously not Mr. McClatchy. I can't answer all that question there. But I wouldn't be able to example, see it coming before Q4 or something, even or even later into the next year.
So I'm sorry. My understanding was that it was a regular report card. My understanding was that that specifically some of the metrics were up for a lot of discussion, and so wouldn't it make sense to actually try to start working through that ahead so that staff has as much time as possible without us pressing it at the end? Because what I would hate to see is where we don't leave it and then it gets to the end and then we're not being able to talk about this in a meaningful way. So
through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to pass it over to Paul McClatchy, as I don't deal with that kind of that report creation.
Thank you. What can I say? We haven't made any specific recommendations to Keefe on how to go about your process of providing review and commentary back. So, I mean, it's really up to the committee to organize how it wants to conduct that. We probably are not going to start working on the next State of Environment report until later in 2022, or sorry, late in 2023. So you have until then to break into working groups or whatever you, however you compose construct your review process.
So with that said, and thank you, sir. With that said, can somebody just educate me on how I can encourage that to happen? Because frankly, I wouldn't want to wait till late in 2023 to first have the conversations on how to measure biodiversity when it's clearly a difficult subject, or else it would have been done easily.
I believe the meeting host has an answer for that.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just introduce myself. My name is Derek O'Shea. I'm the acting deputy city clerk. I was also just here tonight to help host. Just wanted to provide some clarity. So I think what needs to happen is at a future meeting of Keefe in the not too distant future would be to meet and determine the membership of the respective working groups that will then provide the future advice. So that's not something that can be done today, but I think the best course of action, maybe to help you here, Josh, is myself and Ian can discuss with David as chair how we want to proceed with this, and we can set something up for the not too distant future. Unfortunately, we can't decide anything tonight, but I can commit to you, we will come back to the committee in, I'd say, the next couple of weeks with an action plan moving forward, and hopefully that'll help you along the way. I can appreciate your enthusiasm on the matter.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, Josh, that I think getting a review of the existing one in some groups and getting an idea of where we want to go forward is a great idea. So I look forward to hearing from the clerks. Reza, you've got a question? Or?
Yeah, a quick question, David, around the definition of motion. The question is if there is any format, any standard form or structured document to prepare and propose a motion for prospective meetings. Is there such a form available to propose motions for next meetings?
Mr. Sullivan has an answer for that, I hope.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. So you can always reach out to me. I am the committee clerk in charge of the committee with your ideas, and I can help you try to structure in a motion. I will also provide any clarity at that time, whether or not it's in the mandate of the committee to do what the motion is saying, or what else could happen. So that's what I would say to you, Mr. Reza. And we can have a conversation later as well, and we can work with the chair as well.
I'm also happy to help with that too, Reza. You've got my email, or you can email me and I'll give you my phone number and we can have a chat.
Yes, David, thanks.
The process goes through, so that's great.
Yeah.
Councillor Osanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just wanted to say that, yeah, when I was on Keefe, once we did a poll to find out who was interested on what working groups, you don't have to be on a working group, but for those that want like a working group on biodiversity or, like whichever working groups you want, then you just met on your own time, like outside of the Keefe forum, we just met, and then we brought, like when we were ready then to present something to Keefe, we put it on the next Keefe agenda as just like update from the biodiversity working group, for example. So that's how we did it then. I just wanted to provide that input. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, so the date of the next meeting is to be determined. I'll need a mover to adjourn the meeting. This is where y'all get to go home. Put your hands up. Or you're already home. Jessica moves. Ludmilla, come on. You can do it. Yes, seconded by Ludmilla. Thank you, everybody. And I look forward to meeting in the future, hopefully. And Ian and Derek and I will talk over the next couple of weeks, and we'll get going. So welcome again, and look forward to working more closely with all of you.